I don't think I've ever made a video about DLC before, but the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection for Nintendo Switch just got one of the heftiest free DLC updates I've ever seen. Now, for those who don't know and who haven't seen my SNK 40th Anniversary Collection review for the Nintendo Switch, which by the way is linked in the iCard, this is a collection of games from Nintendo Switch that come from the SNK Corporation, famous for systems such as the Neo Geo and games such as Metal Slug, from their early years from the 1970s and 80s. I wasn't familiar with a lot of these games, and while I thought the collection itself was good, I noticed it mainly had issues with oversaturations of certain types of games and themes in their games. This new update seems to fix that by adding 11 new games. So that's what we're going over in today's video. So welcome to Stuff We Play, home of everything weird and retro, and if that sounds cool to you, why not subscribe? And today we're talking about the 11 new games that were added to the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection for the Nintendo Switch. Now, I mentioned before that if you played the original collection, some games, if they got a home console port, you could swap between either playing the NES version of those games or the arcade version. The 11 new games that were added, however, were all arcade exclusive, so no NES version exists of these. With that said, let's jump into the first game. The first of these games is Bermuda Triangle, a sci-fi themed vertical shoot 'em up, where you play as a ship and go through, I'm guessing, the Bermuda Triangle, an area of the world known for the many ships and planes that have gone missing there. I'm assuming it takes a sci-fi theme due to random theories of there being like vortexes to other worlds and whatnot there. But what really makes this game unique is how you play it. Like in many shoot 'em ups, you use one button to shoot and you use one of the joysticks to move your ship. However, here you actually have two types of projectiles. You have a missile that hits ground-based enemies and your main weapon. And you can aim your main weapon by using the right joystick, making this shoot 'em up more reminiscent of the likes of, say, Robotron meets Vertical Gradius, which I guess would be Salamander. A really fun game and I really dig the sci-fi aesthetic here. The next game here is called Chopper. Now, one of my main complaints before was that there are a lot of war-themed games, and this one, yes, is another war-themed game, but this one's also a vertical shoot 'em up, of which there weren't really a lot of on the collection before. This one's very simple, but it is a lot of fun. Yeah, your sprite's a little small, and yeah, the background seemed a little samey at times, but this game is so fun and frantic that more than makes up for that. And Chopper, I'd say, is a game that earned a welcome place on the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. The next game is a very odd one. Fantasy is a game from 1981, and it covers a wide range of genres. You have overhead sections along with side-scrolling shoot-'em-up-esque sections, except I can never figure out how to fire them. You're in a hot air balloon, and then you land on a thing that's firing at you, and then you go through a mini dungeon and rescue a girl, but she seems to be kidnapped by a dinosaur. It's very confusing and perhaps a bit too cryptic for me. But also, like many of the games here, it's one I wasn't familiar with, and though I'm not necessarily fond of it, I think that due to its place in history and very clearly being a part of SNK's early history, it does have a well-deserved spot in this list. Alright, the next game here is one I don't think a lot of people are like, but I absolutely fell in love with it, and it's probably the weirdest game I've ever played, and that's Munch Mobile. A game where you play as a car with eyes, except you also have a giant hand that can extend out from your car, and you need to grab like fish and fruit and whatnot and dispense them into waste baskets, but also you need to avoid other cars, and also you have a gas meter, and if you run out of gas you die, or if you even go slightly off the road you die. But if you successfully complete a level, then at the end of it you get out of your car at your fancy modern Japanese house and you make out with your wife. It's odd. It's very odd. It's the definition of weird. But it also controls well. You control the arm with the right joystick and the car with the left joystick, and as far as I can tell, there's no real major button usage here. It's another very simple arcade game, and it's one that's so odd, yet controls so well that I think everyone should try it at least once. Who knows, you may even fall in love with it like I did. The next game on here is actually the earliest shooter that SNK ever made, and from the late 1970s, that is Ozma Wars. Ozma Wars reminds you a bit of, say, Galaga or whatnot, though it does have an identity of its own. It's a very simple shooter where you can't even move yourself vertically, you just move yourself around the bottom of the screen and you shoot at enemies, whether it be meteors or spaceships or whatnot. But what I really liked about this, I'm not sure if that's because that's how the actual graphics looked or if, like Space Invaders, it was a black and white game with an overlay on it, but it has these really cool single color horizontal columns where each enemy or item in the game, depending on where it is in the screen, will be a different color. And when it goes between these columns, it can be multiple different colors, and it's done in such a way that reminds me a bit of a Sinclair Spectrum game in a way. I know it was probably not originally running on hardware like that, but gives me that vibe. And along with being a great piece of history, this is one that almost 40 years later has absolutely held up extremely well. Here's one I did not expect and was unfamiliar with, Paddle Mania. And this is one of the oddest games I've ever played, but it's fun. It starts off as a normal table tennis game, except what happens is you move your character using the left joystick, but then you can swing your paddle around in 360 degrees with the right joystick. It's a lot of fun. I was really engrossed by it. My only real complaint is that the AI is brutally difficult. Seriously, I could not beat this first guy, which is a shame because looking up gameplay did go through some really diverse environments and experiences here. That said, this is another one that, because of its gameplay alone, is definitely worth giving a try, and it's one I really wish actually had a 2-player mode because I think this one could really be fun with a friend. Now, alright, the next one is going to be brief. It's called Sasuke vs. Commander, where you play as I guess the guard of an ancient shogun and have to shoot enemies. Except my main issue, starting from the first stage, is that your character just kind of blends in with the background. You can't see him well. Another one that's early enough that definitely deserves a spot in the SNK 40th anniversary collection, seeing as it's part of their early history coming from 1980, but it's just not one that's a ton of fun, and honestly I didn't want to play much of it. What is a ton of fun though is Time Soldiers. Now, if you saw my original review, you know there is an abundance of overhead run and gun games, but Time Soldiers is so weird and wacky that I just couldn't help but love it. Like, for example, take this. I start here and I'm running around. Of course, you know, you use your left joystick to move and the right one to aim your weapon. And I'm going through World War II and I'm fighting enemies and whatnot. And then I kill who I think is supposed to be Fidel Castro? Okay. So I'm going through and I see this blue thing. So I'm assuming I could either skip that or go into the blue thing, because the worst that can happen being in arcade games, it could kill me, and being as it's an SNK 40th anniversary collection, if it kills me, I can just use the rewind feature. But no, instead, by going to the blue thing, it was actually a time warp. It sent me all the way back from World War II to the time of the dinosaurs. Except along with dinosaurs, they also have cavemen and exploding Yoshi eggs. So I go through here and I really kill some dinosaurs. Like, this would probably cause some real butterfly effect-esque havoc here. But no, I get to the end of it, I finally get to the boss of the stage, which is a fire-breathing T-Rex. Which, mind-blowing. There's so much more here, but Time Soldiers. This is one I'd really love to find in arcades at some point because it's so much fun. It's another one that's so weird and wacky and filled with charm, and one I kind of wish was on the collection to begin with, but I'm glad it's here via this free DLC update, and is definitely worth your time. But the last game here brings us back to the vertical shooter, and it's much in the same vein as the first one we played, and it's called World Wars. Now this one, despite that name, it has more of a sci-fi theme, so I'm guessing it's based off a theoretic futuristic World War III. But once again, you control your ship using the left joystick, fire with one button, and then aim your main weapon using the right joystick. However, I like this a bit more than the first game we covered, because unlike Bermuda Triangle, your ship's a lot smaller, meaning it's a lot easier to dodge projectiles. But this one is also an absolute ton of fun, and one I can highly recommend. And that's kind of the general thing here. My main issue with the collection before was it lacked a lot of diverse types of games over a diverse set of themes. And while yes, this collection is still primarily overhead run gun shooters and shoot 'em ups, there's so many different ones of weird, wacky sci-fi and historical themes now that I'd go as far to say that because of this free update, the SNK 40th anniversary collection is now the #1 best retro game collection on the Nintendo Switch. That's my final verdict. If you own this collection, definitely download this update and try these games out. And if you were on the fence about this collection before, then this free DLC update is definitely reason enough for you to pick it up now. Just in time for the Christmas season too. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Stay classy. If you feel so inclined, why not back us on Patreon, because every dollar earned from Patreon does go back into the channel itself. And I'll see you next time.